you heard all this reporting day in and day out and day in and day out about J.P. Morgan losing $2 billion and it might go as high as $3 billion? And so what do we need? More government? More regulation? Before we even know exactly what the problem was? The funny thing about capitalism, companies make money and companies lose money. When they make money, they're attacked by the left. When they lose money, it's an excuse for more government. Can't win, can you? Now, I want to put things in perspective because this is way out of control. So J.P. Morgan Chase loses $2 billion in, I think, a 6-week period, right? On some trading scheme. It's a $2.3 trillion company, as Reason magazine reports, with a $190 billion capital base. And that banking unit made more than $12 billion last year. The source for this information, Seeking Alpha. It's a great site. They point out that $800 million quarterly loss represents approximately 4% of the company's total net profit for all of 2011 and less than 2.7% of its operating income. But folks, don't worry. The government's going to step in and fix this so that banks never lose money again. So nobody ever loses money again. Not GM, not Chrysler, not J.P. Morgan Chase. Nobody ever loses money again except you and me, who subsidize everything and who bail out everything. Now, exactly how is the government going to regulate risk out of the market system? And why do we want it to regulate risk out of the market system? What we don't want the government to do is through various rules and fiats and regulations, not to mention statutes, is to create these oligopolies, these massive oligopolies, destroy competition through crony capitalism. We want competition. We want open markets. I could care less that this company lost $2 billion, J.P. Morgan, or if it's going to lose another billion, that would be $3 billion. And what do they mean more government regulation? Why do we knee-jerk this way all the time? Well, we need more government regulation. Oh, the government. Our government loses $2 to $3 billion every other day. Whether it's Medicare fraud or Social Security fraud and disability insurance or Medicaid fraud or tax credits to illegal alien children who don't even live in the country, who don't even exist. Billions and billions and billions of dollars lost by our federal government. Who's regulating the federal government? Does anybody ever get fired from the federal government? Does anybody ever resign from the federal government? But look how they treat us. J.P. Morgan Chase, yes. They blew $2 billion, almost $3 billion. Chump change. It's a multi-trillion-dollar company. Well, Mark, we don't want to have to bail them out. We don't have to bail them out. When did that become the rule? Because Bush and later Obama decided we should bail out Wall Street? We shouldn't bail out Wall Street. We shouldn't bail out Detroit. We shouldn't bail out anybody. It's a big world out there. There's a lot of big companies out there. And if one falls, then others will replace it. We've been led to believe that that's not possible. Of course it's possible. Otherwise, we're all going to sink. Every investment by a big company, medium-sized company, or small company, every investment by an individual, whether they be young or old, smart or stupid, is not going to turn profitable. It's just not. Or we'd all be rich, wouldn't we? Or there'd be no risk, wouldn't there? And if you think more regulations and government bailout and government insurance is going to eliminate risk, of course it doesn't. Look at the situation the nation's facing today. We're bailing out everyone and everything for everything. More regulations, more power to Washington. And if we had a truly free market system where people were making a lot of money, a lot of people making a lot of money, we'd be hearing about we need redistribution of wealth. more skin in the game. So the government always wins. When people in industries are successful, that's bad, so the government has to step in. When they're unsuccessful or have bad trades, that's bad, the government has to step in. Well, when doesn't the government step in? Answer, never. And let me ask you this. Who are these geniuses in the government, and how did they get there? We have no idea who they are, do we? Look at the political class. I dare say that the IQ of the political class is far below that of the people generally. And what of the bureaucrats? Same damn thing. That's why they're bureaucrats for the most part. No offense to the smart ones, but you're in the minority. So J.P. Morgan Chase, day after day. Meanwhile, where's this John Corzine and all the money he blew? Notice they're not chasing him down. Notice that's not a story every day. Oh, I remember that story. He lost $1.2 billion. Then the next story. Oh, we found it. Well, where was it? Oh, it was in his wallet. Now, he just happens to be a $1 million bundler for the Obama campaign. He's not a priority, you see. J.P. Morgan Chase is. We don't need any more regulations. They lost their $2 or $3 billion. Now people will decide whether they want to continue to invest in that company or not, for whatever the reason. But it's an extremely well-capitalized company. It has an enormous amount of money. It's got a solid capital base, and $2 to $3 billion represents 2.7% of its operating income. Most of you have lost a lot more than that on your home, haven't you? Now, you're not going to like this, many of you, but this is much ado about nothing. But we need more government to fix it. Sure. We'll ignore Social Security and Medicare, which are going bust, and the government's 100% responsible for. Well, so what? We'll ignore the federal debt, which is almost $17 trillion, larger than the entire economy. We'll ignore the unfunded obligations, $100 trillion, give or take 10 or 20 trillion, just a rounding error. But we need more government to make sure that J.P. Morgan Chase doesn't lose another $2 or $3 billion. We can't have that. Now, if the oil companies would lose a lot of money, that would be worth a celebration, wouldn't it? I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Let's go to Judith, San Francisco, California, the great KSFO. Go.
Hi, Mark. I wanted to ask you, how come when John Corzine used client money to make his losses, there wasn't any talk about regulation? And here, I've not heard that they've taken client money to make these losses. This is part of doing business, like you're saying.
Now, this is just another excuse to destroy the country. This is just another excuse to go after the banks. Here's what people need to understand. Banks, oil companies, healthcare are smothering with massive reams of regulations. You know, this isn't 1820 or 1830. This isn't, in the case of oil, this isn't the 1880s or the 1890s. These people, these companies, they all have to have a phalanx of lawyers, all kinds of accountants and lobbyists just to keep up with the government's doing to them. One of the reasons the banks aren't lending is they're scared to death. They had to lend money, and this is what the killer is. 30 years ago, really 1977, I've written about this, 35 years ago, with this Community Reinvestment Act, which I brought to the public's attention several years ago, which I write about in Liberty and Tyranny, the government, in essence, nationalized the banking industry. Oh, they could do a few things, and through that, the mortgage industry. And it decided to redistribute your wealth. It decided that the money that the banks had as a result of your payments, as a result of your savings, your investments, would be redistributed like any other government socialist domestic program. And so they would accuse banks of redlining, of racism, of not giving loans to people in poor areas. And we had the Federal Reserve in Boston do a report, an infamous report, typos and all, which was fraudulent, but which gave cover to this scheme. And this is the basis for the destruction of the housing market and our banking system in this country. And then all day today, because this bank lost $2 billion, even though it is worth over $2 trillion, it lost $2 billion. Now what are we hearing? More government regulation, more government, more government. So in other words, the same people who have destroyed Social Security, who have destroyed Medicare, who've destroyed our currency, who destroyed the housing market, who are destroying our credit card system, who are destroying the student loan system, they should have more power. Ladies and gentlemen, no more power to the central government. Period.